What's going on, guys? Welcome to Steve Does Stuff. I'm Steve, and today we're going to be doing some drift prep stuff.
We are at one of my favorite places in the world, the junkyard, because I need a new brake fluid cap for Klaus. Last time I took him to the track, he didn't have one. So I did what any responsible car owner would do. I zip tied a rag over the top and kept driving. A bad day in the junkyard beats a good day anywhere else. And the only thing I need is the cap for this right here. Our first candidate has been pretty well picked over already. Another awesome thing about having this here is if you're anywhere familiar with BMWs, you know that they will go through expansion tanks and cooling parts like crazy. You can just come to the junkyard, pick up as many spare rad hoses, thermostats, and even radiators that you want. Our next candidate, looking like it's in great shape. Damn it. Next up the bat was a 323 2000. Also no cap. Why are these so difficult to find? So for whatever reason, most of these cars do not have brake reservoir cap on them. However, Mazda 3 fit on BMW. So it just goes to show you, if you can't find what you're looking for, a little bit of mixing and matching with the excess of parts you have here, always a good thing. So Mazda 3 brake fluid cap will fit on a BMW. So I'm gonna buy this, I'm gonna head back to the house and start bolt checking them. So in the last video, I kind of gave you guys a walk around of whether I got the car, what I've done to it. And today we are gonna be walking through the bolt check procedure of what I do to get Klaus ready for a weekend of drifting. None of this stuff is super groundbreaking. I took a lot of these tips from like friends of mine and videos online. Chelsea DeNofa is the BMW daddy, and he has got a ton of good tips of how to bolt check these things, what to look for. First thing we got to do is get this thing in the air. Klaus is in the air. It is a spicy one out today. It is always a bit of a task, but being able to get under him. Even before this video started, yesterday when I was cleaning them up, I always like to get them up to temperature, make sure there's no leaks in the cooling system, check my brake fluid, check my power steering fluid, check my oil, check my coolant before it gets hot, and then take him for a spin. See if he's doing anything, pulling to the right, anything super weird. Quick visual inspection as well. If there's any new leaks, valve cover leaks, oil pan leaks, we know that, not a big deal. Go over everything, make sure it isn't building any pressure in the hose. Apparently a sign of a bad head gasket is once you have cooled the car off, if this still is holding excessive pressure in there, you're bad. I've replaced every single hose on this. This is a new used radiator. Make sure to check my wiring for all of this stuff. It is basically my under the hood maintenance. We have to change this from coolant back to water because the track that we're running at does not allow coolant because they're very particular. If I owned a track, I'd probably be pretty particular too, but we're not doing that until the end of the video because if you do it at the start, you're gonna be laying in coolant for the next hour and a half. And of course, before I forget, I need to remove my old brake fluid lid. Put on my new lovely Mazda one. Good as new. I wouldn't recommend doing that. So just a quick note on the fluid levels that I run. The oil that I run in this is, I think, 10W50, and I run it extremely high. I essentially just overfill the system because when it's sloshing around there, drifting and everything, I don't want to cavitate the oil pump and then throw out my rod bearings. So I run it about the full mark. On the opposite end of the spectrum, power steering on these are known to overheat and overboil, hence the pretty awesome cheetah print catch there because I didn't want to spill it on the track. I run this very low. When it's hot, it expands a ton. I have this here to help manage the heat for it. It's right behind the factory fans, but I run it a little low just so it doesn't boil over.
On the same token, I run the coolant pretty low as well. If you overfill these, it doesn't have any room for the coolant to expand because it's all liquid, and then you're just going to blow your coolant tank right apart. So I run this kind of below where it says you should, but I have never had any cooling issues after I put the Mishi fan in here and running it low. It's always been great. Some of the new things that I've done is the CCV delete with my janky ass Amazon catch can over here. I have noticed there's been a fair amount of blow by with this, but nothing crazy around here. Make sure nothing's leaking after sitting all winter. And beyond that, I'm gonna start to do bolt checks. We're talking strut towers on the top of the BCs. So tightening everything in here is definitely a good idea. You definitely want to make sure your shock tower bolts are tight, all of the camber adjustment screws, as well as the very top nut on the top of your coilovers. Those things can come loose. Other than that, visual inspection, zip tie anything that needs to be zip tied. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to cut these to put it on the trailer, but that's about it. Checked all the brake fluid, everything's good. Coolant, we're saving that till last. I'm not gonna change the oil on this only because it's had 1.5 events, 1 drift event, and then 1 track day. Other than that, it was fresh last year. So yes, it's been sitting for a little while, but you also have to bear in mind, this thing's got about 328,000 kilometers on it. So now it's time to kind of crawl underneath and start going over things. So underneath the car, there is a lot of things going on. So first off, this is the FDF kit for the E46, which is beautiful. Everything is gorgeously machined. It's all, Heim joints, the nice little adapters for the knuckles. So there's no real cutting or grinding to make it fit. And our lollipops back here again are a nice, beautiful Heim joints. So these are awesome, but they clank and jank around as anything with Heim joints does, and all of that resonance can really knock loose some of these jam nuts. So on these knuckles, I'm checking every point just with, a quick little turn of the wrench to make sure that they're still tight. Checking my jam nuts on both sides, making sure there's no excessive wear, perhaps like right there. And then looking under the motor, is anything wet that shouldn't be wet? Checking your subframe bolts is a great way to start. And also checking your motor mounts. This thing has a full front to back solid mount kit from Condor Speed Shop. It, again, with the resonance, noise, vibration, and harshness, it translates all of it through the chassis. So it can knock a lot of jam nuts loose. So we're gonna be going through checking side to side. And also wanted to give you guys a flavor for what a BMW is like. Yes, this thing leaks, but it was here all winter, and that's how much it leaked. So it's a little moist, but the only way you know if a BMW's got oil is check the ground below, because she's gonna be leaking. So from under here, we've checked our knuckle adapters, we've checked our lower control arms, we've checked our lollipops, we've checked our BC bottom mounts to make sure those are good. We've been twisting on these collars up here to make sure those are all good. Torqued on our motor mounts and everything seems to be okay. So now we're going to start making our way a little bit further south. The things that I like to check are the trans mount to the actual body, make sure those haven't rattled loose, the Condor Speed Shop mounts. I put a fresh Guibo on here, but always check your bolts, because I went out to a drift event, came back, and I had 2 of 3 bolts. It is a fresh Guibo, but I'll still check it over because this thing takes all of the abuse. Also wanted to point this out, factory resonator here. There is no nonsense, and I can't stand straight pipe BMWs, and I don't know a single person who can. So I have tried to be a responsible owner and do this. In the rear end here, we're going to be checking all of our axle bolts, just looking at this diff. So this is a 346 differential, and these typically come with a 293, I believe. Replaced this a few years ago, fresh fluid in it at the start of last year. It's got a little bit of a weep on it. So we're going to be going through all of the mounting points on this. These are NERPTech lower control arms. This is just the original super rusty subframe that I decided to spray paint gold because, you know, gold's pretty cool. Going through here, shaking everything, making sure everything's all good. These are brand new calipers that I put on from Rock Auto, probably at the start of last year. I had an issue with my handbrake not locking up, and turns out the handbrake is just bad. So that is also going to be part of today's video of what we're going to be doing. So let's keep bolt checking, and hopefully we don't find anything terrible. Okay, so rolling around under a car sucks a lot, but we're done. We didn't really find too many things that were messed up. Poor rear camber arms were kind of a little dinked up. They were a little looser than I would have liked, but everything else was super tight, which makes sense. There was only really one drift event and then one just lapping day that I took this thing out and beat on it. So right now, the big two things we have to deal with is I have to replace all the coolant with water so I don't potentially overheat and puke it all over the Gamebridge go-kart track next weekend. So now something that I've been putting off doing for quite a while is fixing this handbrake. As you can see by all of the many fittings on here, she's eBay, and great things happen when you cut corners right up until they don't. So the biggest issue I'm having, and I don't know why, is this thing was never great at locking up the tires, and also if you just go slowly, it will go all the way to the back. So what I think is happening is the master cylinder is basically just kind of giving up. So did I learn my lesson and get a quality handbrake and spend a few $100? I absolutely did not learn my lesson. This is another little eBay setup. You know, they're 40 bucks. And the primary reason for doing this is we're going drifting next weekend, and everything in the car is currently set up for these like weird ass Chinese fittings that they have. So to make my life easy, I decided to go with the same setup because I can use the existing mounts and everything like that. I hate dealing with brake lines. I flared all the lines for this. I struggled. I basically invested about 2 or 3 weeks time into making a $40 handbrake work. Hopefully I can just switch it out quick, but you know, right off the bat, eBay true to their form, this does not fit in there. So this is supposed to be the pivot point in here, so I have to drill this out. Didn't need much, just needed a little clearancing. I settled for just straight up and down. I know the other one, the pivot point or the handle kind of comes out a little bit more, so it'll be interesting to see where this thing sits. But right now, it is time to face the nightmare that is going to be pulling these lines off, getting brake fluid everywhere, cursing and swearing, and then putting it all back together. Well, it just goes to show you, you're one broke bolt away from a job turned into an absolute disaster. I mushed this weird fitting in, taking it off, and now it's kind of not quite a perfect circle anymore. A little tough to get the threads to actually bite into here, so I'm gonna have to work this out. This guy's the same fitting that should be going into it, so I'm just gonna have to work this back and forth and try and see if I can save this thread, because otherwise I just killed my brakes. Bit of a struggle fest, but the new master cylinder is in here. We got the fitting fixed. That was terrifying. Yeah, don't use open-ended wrenches on brake fittings. Apparently they're very soft. So now that this thing is in here, I'm still not digging the black handle. So I think I'm gonna be painting this guy. Give it a little bit of gold flavor. Okay, things are looking significantly better in here. We got the handle back on, sprayed down in gold. I've been testing it, you know, pushing here and there and just tightening the fittings as I need to. Now it's just doing like some little stuff. This is one of my trunk lights. Had a quick disconnect lens on it. I'm just gonna be gluing this back together with some contact cement. It's been a bit of a journey here. Had both of our rear wheels off. Ended up bleeding out the system for about 10-15 minutes. New handbrake is in, and it is nice and stiff. This thing is bolt checked tip to tail. It is time to get the coolant out of this thing and replace it with, I'm supposed to use distilled water, but yeah, we're just gonna use regular water. So in BMWs, these are very fragile. I have fortunately had pretty good luck with them. These are just the petcocks for the rad and the lower rad hose. I drain them out, fill them up full of water, and then redrain the expansion tank, and that's usually all I do to make sure it's good. So let's get into that right now. good enough. It's a great way to get coolant into your armpit. It's also important to take the cap off the expansion tank. It's just going to help reduce the amount of vapor lock that you're going to get from doing this. To fill up the system in the E46 BMWs, you have to pull the bleed screw and overfill the expansion tank, so the little indicator is going to come way up just to kind of fill the rest of the system. And then once it starts puking at the bleed screw, you're good. You can kind of just let any air bubbles kind of come out of it. And then you need to go back down underneath and drain it out of the actual expansion tank, just to bring that level down nice and low. And here's what that looks like. You're supposed to use distilled water, but Hamilton's Finest tap water has never really steered me wrong. So we're gonna keep the trend up. Free pour. Now you can see the level indicator is quite up, but we're just going to keep pounding the water to it until it starts puking out that little hole. Didn't take very long. Turns out the cooling system is just over 3 liters. I always like to kind of give her a little, make sure it's well full. Sure looks like it. Bleed screw back in. Let's get back under this thing one more time and drain this down so it's just sitting below the top. She's spraying from down here. We're just gonna wait until this thing goes down. Perfect. She's starting to go down. Yeah, about right there. Perfect. So now the cooling system has been flushed. I'll probably just run this thing for a little while. Make sure that there's no air pockets, make sure it's cooling properly, all that good stuff. So that's gonna about do it for this episode of Steve Does Stuff. Next time we are going drifting. This thing is ready to go. We'll be headed to Gamebridge Go-Kart track up by Beaverton. I'm gonna be headed up there this Saturday night, and I'm gonna be sleeping in the truck with this thing in tow behind me. But that's all for this time. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.